germination rate and mean height of Asclepias syriaca, Elymus canadensis, and Chemacrista fasciculata by us. And first, we would like to acknowledge Dr. Schaefer and Professor Nickel for their help throughout this entire experiment and getting us seeds and space in the greenhouse, and also the William Jewell College Biology Department for letting us use the greenhouse and other supplies.
Okay, so some basic background. The overall purpose of this experiment is kind of figuring out why there's been a huge decrease in the population of milkweed in recent years, and that's basically because, and it's important because monarchs are primarily use milkweed in all the stages of the life cycle, so they're directly related. So a decrease in milkweed populations means a decrease in monarch populations. The milkweed, and we were investigating competition among milkweed, so intra and inter-specific competition. Both inter and intra-specific competition can be decided on the root levels. So within intra-specific competition, basically the seeds that are going to germinate first are going to be the seeds that outcompete the others because they'll have a more established root system quicker. In inter-specific competition, it can also be decided on the root level, but that's sometimes going to be due to morphological and physiological differences in the different species. That's going to better allow them to gather nutrients in the soil. And in addition to being in the root system, it can also be competition for light availability. So plants that, again, germinate quickest and grow fastest and are exposed to light quickest are going to have a leg up on the other plants, and so that thus favors fast-growing perennials. So our analogy, we chose 3 football teams from the AFC West: the Raiders, the Chiefs, and the Broncos. The Chiefs in this example represent the milkweed because they're, our favorite. They're the species we're focusing on. So the Raiders in this example, we said that they have a good offense but a pretty bad defense. The Chiefs have a mediocre offense and a mediocre defense, and then the Broncos have a good defense but a pretty bad offense. Maybe that's not true now, but that's just a person. So the reason this represents interspecific competition is because when different teams play the Chiefs, sometimes it could be the mediocrity of the entire Chiefs team that's going to prevail, or sometimes the strength of one of the other 2 teams is going to prevail and outcompete the Chiefs for the championship in the AFC West. So then the intra-specific competition in this is represented by 2 running backs for the Chiefs, Sharkhendrick West there on the left and Spencer Ware on the right, and these 2 running backs compete week in and week out, trying to see who gets more carries that week and ultimately who's named the starting running back for the Chiefs. So the 3 species we studied, like Charlotte mentioned, are Elymus canadensis, that's Canada wild rye there on the left, Asclepias syriaca, which is common milkweed there in the middle, and then Chemacrista fasciculata, which is partridge pea. So partridge pea's ability to fix nitrogen may affect the availability of phosphorus in the soil, and that phosphorus is going to be able to, that availability is going to inhibit other plants from being able to grow. And there's a little background about Elymus canadensis. The Canada wild rye contains an endophytic fungi in the roots and the leaves of the plant that's going to produce a toxin that deters herbivores and also alters the water uptake processes of the plants, and that's going to make it more drought tolerant. And Asclepias syriaca, the milkweed, doesn't respond well to competition from early successional grasses, and that early successional grass is represented by Elymus canadensis in this experiment.
Okay, so our question was, how does the identity of competitors affect the germination and growth of milkweed? So our first hypothesis was that milkweed grown with Canada wild rye would have the lowest germination rate because Canada wild rye is a very fast-growing early successional prairie plant. And then we said that milkweed grown with milkweed grown with partridge pea and Canada wild rye would have the second lowest germination because all 3 species will be vying for the exact same nutrients and water and sunlight. And then milkweed grown by itself would have the second highest germination rate because it would have no other species vying for nutrients. And then milkweed grown with partridge pea would have the highest germination rate because of the nitrogen-fixing bacteria, and partridge pea could help milkweed assimilate nutrients. And then for height, we said Canada wild rye would have the tallest height, partridge pea would have the second tallest, and milkweed would be the shortest.
Our study was conducted at the William J. College greenhouse. 40 pots and products were purchased by Dr. Schaefer. The milkweed, Canada wild dry, and partridge species were ordered by Dr. Nickel. There were 4 treatments in our experiment, so there was 10 pots per treatment. As you can see, we created a diagram to properly organize and implement the seeds into the correct pot. One treatment consisted of 12 milkweed seeds in each pot. Another treatment consisted of 6 milkweed seeds and 6 partridge pea seeds in each pot. This one consisted of 6 milkweed seeds and 6 Canada wild dry seeds in each pot. And this treatment consisted of 4 milkweed seeds, 4 partridge pea seeds, and 4 Canada wild dry seeds in each pot. Plants were watered every other day. The experiment was conducted over a month starting on October 18, 2016. The height and total number of germinants were measured weekly, and the pots were randomly sorted to prevent treatments gaining more liability than the other.
Okay, so our results for the mean height of each plant, Canada wild rye had a mean height of 9.11 centimeters, partridge pea had a mean height of 2.6 centimeters, and milkweed had an average height of 1.7 centimeters. But it is noted that only one milkweed plant was taken into account for the plant height. And then for our germination rate, we had a total rate of 3.5%. Canada wild rye had a 14% germination rate, milkweed had a 0.7% germination rate, and partridge pea had a 1% germination rate. Overall, this graph shows how many seeds in each treatment germinated. So milkweed only treatments had 0 germinates. Milkweed with Canada wild rye had 10 Canada wild rye germinates. Milkweed with partridge pea had 1 milkweed and 1 partridge pea germinate, and then milkweed with partridge pea and Canada wild rye had 1 milkweed germinate and 4 Canada wild rye. And no statistical analysis could be performed because we had very inconsistent data and just also a lack of data.
Okay, so due to what Charlotte said about the insignificant data, we cannot say with confidence whether our hypothesis was supported or rejected due to just the lack of milkweed grown. We weren't able to see a positive and a negative competitive interaction between our test species. To explain some of our results biologically, each species was recommended cold stratification 2 to 6 weeks. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, we were not able to cold stratify our species. For the significance of that, our common milkweed we were told to stratify from 7 days to 11 months at 5 degrees Celsius. So again, unable to do that. When milkweed seeds are stratified, the seeds germinate. They germinate from 75 to 85%. So that is quite a stark difference from the 0.7% germination we had. There also could have been a lack of viable seeds. Common milkweed needs sexual reproduction from 2 genetically distinct individuals that are geographically isolated, meaning that they need to be crossed from individuals that are not related to each other geographically. And the greenhouse position could have had a potential ill effect on the amount of light they got based on its 3 sides covered in hardwood forest and 1 side is covered by the wall of white science. Methodological reasons for our results could be the fluctuation in watering. We started watering every 2 days based on the assumption of tall grass prairies having water limitations. We switched to every other day because we were informed that'd be a better water cycle. For future study, we'd definitely cold stratify our species, and we'd also constrain them in larger pots. We feel that the seeds were too close together. The significance is for milkweed restoration would result in monarch repopulation. Between 1999 and 2010, 81% of monarch populations decreased by 81% across the country, coupled with a 58% decrease in milkweed. Monarchs are crucial. Milkweed is crucial to monarchs because their larval stage eats exclusively milkweed, and the adults lay their eggs on the monarchs. So, in hopes for conservation, we would allocate prairies, late successional prairies without disturbances to increase the chance of milkweed restoration. There's a left-sided. This is the team. Do you have any questions?
Egg? Is that an egg?
Yeah.
Team building egg time.
Oh, that's right. Forgot about that. Okay, we're gonna clap now. Clapping classes.
Halfway through a week.
I feel like we need just like a picture of that, so we just use that as a like.
Yeah, can you see? Oh, I've got it.
Okay.
That picture might reappear in your future.
Sure.
It is.
I feel like that's a face like, why are we doing this? Like, you ask that question.
That's
Like,
what we were aiming.
Yeah.
questions for you guys.
Yes.
Micah.
I volunteer tribute. Can you go back to like the hypothesis slide? Yeah. I was confused on like, I was like looking at the graph and like trying to listen to what you were saying, and I was like, what?
Okay, so this graph is just like hypothetical number of germinates. So we were thinking that milkweed grown with partridge pea would have the highest growth or germination rate, and then milkweed grown with milkweed grown alone would have the second highest germination rate. Milkweed grown with Canada wild rabbit and partridge pea would have the third highest germination rate, and then milkweed grown only with Canada wild rat would be the lowest.
Okay.
So just hypothetical.
Okay, so I get that this is hypothetical,
Yeah.
but why?
We
Aren't there
also-
the same number of seeds in every pot? So why are there only 30 hypothetical germinants in milkweed alone, and in the combined one there's 80? Like,
I guess the question is that scale relevant or?
It was across all 10
Yeah.
pots per treatment, not single pots. But
So-
okay, so not an average.
So yeah, the different colors of the graph show the division of each
Yeah, no, I
species.
get that, but you have the same number of seeds. All of the bars should be the same height, right? We're assuming that the germination rate, aren't they?
Well, I guess what they're saying is that you
So
have.
there are 120
example-
seeds in each treatment, and we don't think all 120 seeds are going to germinate.
Yeah.
So of the seeds we think are going to germinate, then we divided it among each species.
So you think overall milkweed will have alone will have the lowest germination overall, but
But it won't germinate the lowest amount of milkweed since that's what we're focusing on. That was the main thing.
Right.
yeah, I think part of the reason this is a little confusing is because you're using total number of germinates rather than kind of
Yeah,
like
an
an
average.
average, and so I think that makes it confusing to figure out.
If we would have just left if we would have said number of germinates of milkweed, would that have made it clear?
Or if you had said like
Yeah.
total.
Because there's
number of
120
Yeah.
milkweed seeds in the treatment of only milkweed. There's 60 in milkweed and Canada wild rye and milkweed and partridge pea. There's only 40 in all three of them.
Yeah, or
So-
like
So they're in number of germinates. You have to take that into consideration.
or something like percent germination,
Sure.
because then
Yeah.
the starting amount doesn't really matter. It's just like how many of those you think will actually be germinating.
Or since it's a hypothesis as well, I mean, you could just, I mean, silly me, I kind of went into the whole project thinking, oh, they're all going to germinate,
Yeah.
right? And like it just didn't even occur to me, which was stupid because I know that not all seeds germinate. But sort of based on 100%, I mean, I guess I would have just scaled it to sort of 100%, right? Or
Yeah.
and maybe that's not really right either, but.
Almost the opposite of that was true, which is
I
unfortunate.
know. Yeah.
So, what factors overall affect seed germination?
What? Yeah.
You-
What
you
causes a
mentioned-
seed to germinate?
You guys mentioned close ratification, but what other things would be important for seed germination?
Sure. I believe in all of our papers we discussed the possibility of our in a methodological we mentioned the variability in our watering could have had an effect. We read one paper that said that basically the most important thing is the initial watering of a seed to induce germination, and if
Why?
our scale
Yeah.
of
Okay.
water,
So stop. Yes.
Why?
Why? The initial watering is critical. Why? Someone
you have
besides
to-
you guys should know this too.
you have to have something. You have to have some response of the seed to induce germination. Whether that's a response of like opening the seed husk itself as a result of interaction with the water.
Okay.
We also
So it
read-
softens the seed
Yeah.
coat. What
we
else
also
does it
read
do?
another thing that exposure to light in some prairie grasses was a dependent factor on germination.
Yeah, some seeds need light, but what else
That's
does
definitely
water
okay.
do?
I'm sure it catalyzes the reaction of growth.
It activates enzymes. Okay, so it's dormant, right?
Sure.
And then the only thing, basically, can I say that? Basically, the only thing
I don't know what you're saying next.
that
but-
causes seeds to germinate is water. Okay, they have to have water. It's called imbibition, right? And it softens the seed coat so that once those enzymes are activated, chemical reactions start occurring. It starts to the cells start to divide, and it can break out of that seed coat. It's all about the water.
Yeah, I would say the most important thing.
Yeah.
Because Charlotte, for her research, is going to test like smoke fire cues. Some species need like smoke cues or other chemicals that would induce it. But water, like without water, smoke and fire
Yeah.
are going to matter, right? And
Sure.
so water is the primary thing that's important. These other things I would say are secondary to water. So, yeah. Why do you think that? So this, when you're talking about nitrogen fixation in partridge pea, that was a little confusing. But why would you think that milkweed with grown with partridge pea would have higher germination?
We said that it'd have higher germination because the nitrogen fixing bacteria would that's in the partridge pea in the legume would create more available nitrogen by the surface where the milkweed seeds were also there, so kind of I guess gather more and then allow the milkweed to capitalize on that and assimilate into its own root system and start growing.
So would that affect germination?
Well, it wouldn't affect germination. That's why we're just. I guess that's true. That'd be just simply the water, but I guess that was kind of alluding to the growth aspect,
Yeah.
the height of each plant.
Okay, it makes sense from a growth perspective,
Yeah.
but not for germination.
But I think, Logan, if I'm not mistaken, in your introduction, I think you said something about phosphorus inhibits plant growth. Something about legumes do something to phosphorus, and that inhibits plant growth. Do you remember that
Well,
part?
phosphorus is like kind of the energy source in a way, isn't it? So
Not energy.
what's the
Well, what's phosphorus?
What is
a
phosphorus?
component of? Is what is the phosphorus component of what you're thinking about? What's the form of energy? Yeah. So nitrogen things are part of
Yeah, so-
ATP. So that's what we're thinking, but that's not the only function of phosphorus.
well, we were just kind of thinking along the basis of energy and that energy that's kind of being produced by the partridge bee would kind of allow their root system to develop faster and therefore take away space from other plants that surround. So at the same time that it's helping it, it could also hurt.
So you're basically saying that the nitrogen fixing plant, because it needs phosphorus for fixation, is taking phosphorus out of the soil more than another plant would be?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like that's why I said it decreases the availability of it, and that decrease in the availability would inhibit the growth of the other plants.
Okay, so if that was, well, I guess, I mean, this hypothesis about germinants, but if that was true, then that would kind of change your hypothesis.
It would have maybe a neutral effect because
And
I'm trying to think of.
I don't know if there was a definitive answer from our literature if nitrogen fixation by the root nodules, the symbiosis between the bacteria and the plant, created more available nitrogen, like in the soil,
Yeah.
or if it was only, fixing nitrogen for the plant itself.
Yeah, in some cases it would be like nitrogen fixing plants often have higher nitrogen concentrations in their plant tissue. So when they die, then there's more nitrogen like in the plant tissue to decompose and be released to the soil. So that's often more the mechanism of increasing nitrogen rather than necessarily fixing it and exuding it into the soil, right?
Because
It's
that
like
doesn't have really an evolutionary advantage for the for the herbaceous
the plant needs it itself, but if it has more nitrogen in its tissues when it dies and decomposes, that could put more nitrogen into the soil. I was like, I don't
Which
know.
in a perennial could happen every
Oh,
year,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
We think-
absolutely.
Yeah, especially in a prairie
So if-
species.
So if it had
Can we go back to the phosphate while you're thinking about
what was the what's the it's genet, right?
Uh-huh.
If it was behaving in that way to where they all essentially grew together,
So for everyone else, genet is a genetic individual.
then it's the
So
rampant.
sometimes,
It's
and you
the-
guys saw this a little bit with
foal, right?
hold on.
I'm sorry.
So, most plants we think about them reproducing we think about them reproducing sexually, right? They have flowers and they make seeds, and those seeds go off and make new plants. But a lot of plants can also reproduce asexually, right? Where they form suckers, right? You guys mentioned one of your
Or
species,
rhizomatous.
rhizomatous, yeah, that other word. Where basically from sort of root structures or underground stem structures, a new plant comes up. They're connected, they're clones, they're genetically identical. So some interesting species that do this are like aspen trees. That's why when you go to Colorado and you see this whole sort of mountainside, and if you look carefully at the bark, you'll see a lot of those will have the same bark characteristics, the same black colorations in them. They'll all turn the same sort of hue in their leaf color in the fall, or at the same time. Those are all genetically identical to one another, and so
That actually helped. Because
It's also
I forgot. No, and I meant specifically because of the rhizome growth, like within the rhizome. So if it's a ram, I don't know if partridge behaves this way. It would be beneficial for them to create like extra root, like to fix nitrogen and then expel it from the roots for its own benefit of like a ram situation. But I don't think they do that. So
Is partridge tree an annual or perennial?
annual.
I think they're annuals, yeah. So
are they?
I thought they were.
I thought.
Unless I'm thinking of the wrong species.
They only come back. They don't come back. Here we go. Sorry.
Maybe I'm thinking of a different plant. I'm not sure. I can't. Not that I read about this a lot, but I can't think of any studies that have necessarily shown that legumes are better competitors for phosphorus. Like even though they need phosphorus for nitrogen fixation, I'm not sure that like studies have shown that they outcompete other plants for phosphorus. So I'm not sure. I think your logic makes sense, but I'm not sure they actually would take up more phosphorus than other
That's
plants would. Did you find a paper that said that?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
it was.
Which can you go to your slides? Which one is that?
And yeah.
It was. It
Archer
wasn't like we
is
didn't
in-
cite it in the slide. It was
Oh, okay.
because we just kind of kept it. Purely like diagrams and such on it. It was Foot and Jacobs, 1966.
But is that at the end?
1966. That's probably why I haven't read it.
Oh.
I don't go. I am not
You're
very good
so
at going back to like a really old paper. Okay. Yeah. Sure. Not gonna argue with someone's last name.
Foot.
And yeah, just to reiterate, Partridge P. This probably doesn't count because I'd have to look it up. I was, we were right. It's in the
Oh.
Okay. Okay. How deep did you plant your seeds, and how might planting depth have influenced germination?
I think it was like a half inch to an inch. We just kind of measured to our first knuckle.
Yeah.
So we just put our finger in the soil.
What are those units?
Centimeters. I don't know. I don't know how it translates to centimeters, but
It's like three.
I
like
measured
3
the
to
tip of
4
my finger and it's
centimeters, 4
exactly an
centimeters.
inch.
No, the seed packs tell you inches. I was
Yeah.
okay, so how would seed depth potentially influence germination?
Well, as we're talking about light penetration as a potential factor for germination, and of course water is the most important. A study we found showed that that some prairie species needed the disturbance of soil to increase the potential chance of light penetration to induce their germination. So if our species required that disturbance, they didn't get it, and very well could have there could have been less light penetration into the soil.
Okay,
Less
so
chance of
say you've
production.
got a seed deep in your soil, and there's enough water that it might germinate, so the radicle might emerge. If it's deep in the soil, what is that plant not going to be able to do?
It might be too heavy, like the soil might be too heavy or too compacted for it to kind of grow up through.
Yeah,
so
so
the
at
higher
some
up it would be,
point-
the less soil it would have to go through.
Yes, at some point it still could maybe be like emerging as a radical deeper in the soil if it's getting enough water, but it won't, like if it's too far down, it's not going to actually
And
It
it
use
has-
all of its
reserve, like trying to get.
before it can start photosynthesis.
Yeah, and so
So if those cotyledon leaves don't break the
Right.
surface, then it runs out of fuel and
Yeah.
stuff. Which we could well, probably too late now, but we should have
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
dug through the few few initial centimeters of the soil to see if there were if that
that
occurred.
happened.
Yeah. So of course what I find interesting about your project is the application in terms of the monarchs and such. What are some of the reasons why the milkweed population has been reduced by, I think you said 51, 54? 58%.
From 1999 to 2010, and
Yeah.
the biggest reason that I found was glyphosate-based herbicides in agricultural fields. So the milkweed growing directly in those fields is greatly affected, and through like surface runoff, other adjacent populations could be affected.
And I found a paper saying that they grow along roadsides a lot. Well,
Yeah.
those get mowed by the city or state, whoever takes care of that. So they may be growing great and have a good population there, but the next week they might come through and cut it all the way down. So then it either has to regrow if the roots are still there, or the seeds may not have been mature enough and not been dropped to resprout.
And of course, all of these are exacerbated by the relative inefficiency of milkweed reproduction, because they don't produce viable seeds very often, and in the wild it can take them up to 15 years of growth to reach sexual maturity. So
That blows my mind.
it's their genetics and their evolutionary history coupled with our
That's what I
Are you okay?
Yeah. It was just telling me to check my blood sugar. We're good.
Yeah, and they were also saying that restoration efforts, they found it most effective to grow milkweed in a greenhouse where you can, control all the variables. That's not very realistic, because since it takes so long to grow and reach flowering stage and even reach a stage to where it's going to survive if you replant it in the wild, it's not realistic to be able to grow that much milkweed in a greenhouse and then create those small populations.
So unfortunately, unless there's like dramatic restoration efforts, we could see the end of milkweed in our lifetime.
I do think
Yeah.
people are focusing on restoration. Like when I was talking to people up at Smithville Lake, like they were working on a grant because there was money available to do milkweed restoration or seeds. I mean, I don't say this. I had a specific methodology they were using, but there was money specifically allocated
Yeah.
to working. With
One of the
milkweed.
papers that I read, I think Logan was just talking about this one. They said that they took seeds, like they just planted seeds out in the prairie to see how they would grow, but they also planted the same seeds in a greenhouse and then let those grow up to different stages and then replanted those out in the prairie. And the ones that were replanted after, I think, a couple of years of growth, those had less of a decline in population, so less died off once they were already kind of more established and producing everything. So it was better to grow a bunch in a greenhouse and then replant them all over a prairie than it was to just plant seeds or throw seeds out in the prairie and hope that they'll germinate. So that'd be difficult.
But people like monarchs. So
They're pretty.
Yeah.
And that's why, like on the one of the last slides, you put a bunch of pictures of monarchs.
yeah,
And the immensity of.
this is the
Oh, those are all. I didn't
Yeah,
know
those are
that.
Oh.
those are the
I was like, those are really big leaves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't see that either. The last thing is just a minor, again, semantics. Sometimes we like to point out semantics things. So, sorry, Christian, but in the, I think it was you, in this
Beginning
results,
discussion.
yeah, results or slash, you said, no, you're right, it wasn't a discussion, yeah. You said, something about insignificant data, you weren't able to blah, blah, blah. So you just have to be really careful with how you use that terminology. So you didn't have insignificant data because that implies that you did statistics. And so it's just a terminology thing, and that you would want to say, due to insufficient data or something like that, right? I think that's probably what you meant to say.
Yeah.
So again, it's just, a lot of people make that mistake, and so it's just something to kind of keep an eye on, that we have we have to very carefully choose our words when it comes to things with statistics specifically. It implies things.
I appreciate that, because it was insufficient. We were looking for germination and mean height of milkweed as it relates to competition, and you need milkweed.
You kind of have to have that plants grow in order for that to happen.
Honeysuckle
Alright.
seeds